The crack of the rifle split the crisp morning air at Fort Bragg's advanced sniper training facility. Former Colonel James Iron Blackwood stood motionless, his weathered face revealing nothing as he watched the young recruit lower his weapon. The shot had missed by 6 inches at 800 yards. Not terrible, but not good enough. "With all due respect, sir," the recruit said, unable to mask his frustration. "These old M24s are outdated. Nobody uses these anymore, except in training." Blackwood's steel-gray eyes narrowed slightly. At 65, he'd heard every excuse in the book. His calloused hands, marked with the scars of 4 decades of service, took the rifle from the young man. "The weapon is never the problem, son." His voice was low-graveled by years of shouting orders across battlefields on 3 continents. "Your fundamentals are solid, but you're anticipating recoil, pushing the shot." A few of the other recruits exchanged glances. One of them, braver than the rest, stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, we've been told you were the best in your day, but things have changed. Modern snipers use advanced ballistic computers, rangefinders, wine meters. It's more science than art now." The old warrior said nothing. He simply turned to the range officer. "Set up a target at 1,200 yards. Murmurs rippled through the group. 1,200 yards with a standard M24 in these wind conditions. The range officer raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to question Blackwood. "You're not seriously going to try that, are you?" the young recruit asked. "The effective range of this rifle is—" "I know the effective range," Blackwood interrupted, loading a single round into the chamber. "Been firing it since before you were born." The wind whipped across the range, blowing at 15 knots and gusting to 20, a notoriously tricky crosswind that had been throwing off shots all morning. Blackwood took position, adjusting his body to the familiar weight of the rifle. To the recruits, he suddenly seemed younger, as if decades had melted away. He took 3 deep, measured breaths. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Between beats, he squeezed the trigger. The sharp report echoed across the range. Through their scopes, the recruits watched in disbelief as the center of the distant target disintegrated. Dead center, at 1,200 yards, in unpredictable wind conditions, with a standard-issue rifle. Blackwood stood, handing the weapon back to the stunned recruit. "It's not about the equipment, never has been." He surveyed the group of young men and women, all of them now hanging on his every word. "The best technology in the world won't save you if you don't understand the fundamentals. Wind, earth rotation, breathing, heartbeat." One of the female recruits, her eyes wide with newfound respect, raised her hand. "Sir, how did you make that shot?" Blackwood allowed himself a rare smile. "Practice. 40 years of it, but that wasn't even close to the most impossible shot I've ever witnessed." The recruits leaned in, sensing a story. "The most impossible shot I ever saw," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that forced them to lean closer, "was in the Sierra Nevada mountains 5 years ago. A shot that saved my life and the lives of 5 other men. A shot that officially never happened." The training session forgotten, the recruits gathered around the old warrior as he gestured for them to sit. "Let me tell you about the ghost of Sierra Ridge." The Sierra Nevada mountains, 2017. The sky was the deep blue that only comes at high altitudes, unmarred by clouds. 6 men in advanced tactical gear moved silently through the pine forest, each step calculated, each movement precise. They were ghosts themselves, leaving no trace of their passage. At point was Commander Frank Reynolds, 48 years old and a legend in the SEAL community. 25 years of service, 14 deployments. His weathered face bore the subtle scars of a life lived in the world's most dangerous places. Behind him moved Marcus Stone, the team's primary sniper, 32 years old with eyes that missed nothing. He carried a specialized Macmillan TAC-338 rifle, capable of extreme long-distance precision. James Blackwood, then 60 years old, but still moving with the fluid grace of a man half his age, was the team's senior tactical officer. Technically, he should have been behind a desk years ago, but some men are simply too valuable in the field. Blackwood had forgotten more about special operations than most men would ever learn. The other 3 team members, Rodriguez, Washington, and Chen, were younger in their 30s, but each had seen enough combat to age their souls well beyond their years. Their mission was classified at the highest levels. Intelligence had located Viktor Kozlov, a former Spetsnaz operative, turned international terrorist responsible for bombings across Europe that had killed hundreds. What made this operation particularly sensitive was the location. Koslov wasn't hiding in some remote cave in Afghanistan or a compound in Yemen. He was running a training camp for domestic terrorists right here in American territory, deep in the Sierra Nevada wilderness. The operation had been planned for weeks. Satellite imagery, drone reconnaissance, thermal mapping. They had every technological advantage. But technology can fail. Human intelligence rarely does. Which is why the presence of Morgan Hayes was so contentious. Hayes stood at the forward operating base, watching the team's departure with thinly veiled frustration. 35 years old, she had been an Olympic-level biathlete before joining military intelligence. Her file said she spoke 4 languages, had extensive wilderness survival training, and knew the Sierra Nevada region better than anyone else in service. She also happened to be a woman, which seemed to be the only credential Commander Reynolds cared about. "This is bullshit, and you know it," she'd said to Reynolds earlier that morning, her voice low to avoid being overheard by the rest of the team. "I'm the one who developed the intel on Koslov's location. I should be going with you." Reynolds had barely looked at her as he checked his weapon. "We don't need a babysitter, Hayes, especially not one who's never seen actual combat. I've completed all the same training you have. Training isn't combat." Reynolds finally met her gaze. "Look, you're the liaison officer. Your job is to coordinate with local authorities if needed. Stay here, monitor comms, and be ready to call in backup if things go sideways. That's your role. Accept it." Hayes had opened her mouth to argue further, but Blackwood had caught her eye and given an almost imperceptible shake of his head. She'd swallowed her protest, nodded curtly, and stepped back. Now, as the team moved deeper into the wilderness, Blackwood found himself thinking about Hayes. He'd reviewed her file more thoroughly than Reynolds had. There was something there, something between the lines of her official history that intrigued him. Before leaving, he'd approached her privately. "Reynolds is old school," he'd told her. "Don't take it personally." Hayes had studied him as if measuring his sincerity. "You're older than he is. You seem to manage not being a dinosaur." Blackwood had laughed softly. "I've had daughters in service. Makes you see things differently." He'd paused. "Your grandfather was Jack Hayes, wasn't he, Ghost Hayes?" The surprise had registered in her eyes before she could mask it. "You knew of him. His reputation in Vietnam was legendary. 27 confirmed kills, most over 1,000 yards, with equipment that would be considered primitive today." Blackwood had smiled. "They called him Ghost because the enemy never saw him coming." Something had shifted in Hayes, then a subtle change in her posture. "He taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. Said I had the steadiest hands he'd ever seen." "I believe it." Blackwood had turned to go, then stopped. "Hayes, sometimes the most important players in an operation are the ones nobody sees." Now, pushing those thoughts aside, Blackwood focused on the mission. The team had been moving for 4 hours steadily, climbing through increasingly rugged terrain. According to their intel, Kozlov's compound was nestled in a remote valley, accessible only by a single narrow pass, a natural bottleneck that would be heavily guarded. Reynolds held up a closed fist, the signal to halt. The team froze, becoming part of the landscape. The commander pointed 2 fingers to his eyes, then forward. Stone nodded, moving ahead with Blackwood to establish an observation position. Crawling on their bellies to the edge of a rocky outcrop, the 2 men set up their optics. Stone extended the bipod of his rifle while Blackwood unpacked a high-powered spotting scope. Below them stretched a deep valley, and on the far side, partially concealed by natural rock formations and pine trees, stood a collection of structures. To the untrained eye, they might have looked like abandoned mining facilities or seasonal hunting cabins. To Blackwood, they screamed military installation. "I count 12 tangos visible," Stone whispered, his eye never leaving his scope. 2 on patrol along the northern perimeter, 4 at what appears to be a firing range, 6 others moving between buildings. Blackwood adjusted his spotting scope, focusing on the largest structure. "That's definitely our target. See the satellite dish. The way it's positioned, that's Russian military spec, not commercial. And those aren't standard solar panels. They're tactical power cells." Stone shifted his position slightly. "Something feels off, Blackwood." "What do you mean?" "Too exposed. Kozlov's ex-Spetsnaz. He wouldn't position his men so visibly unless—" Both men realized it at the same moment. Stone began to lower his rifle as Blackwood reached for his radio, but it was already too late. The first shot came from their left flank, splintering rock inches from Stone's head. Instantly, the air was filled with the crack of high-velocity rounds. They were caught in a perfect crossfire. Contact left, contact right. Blackwood shouted into his radio, already pulling Stone back from the exposed position. It's an ambush. Fall back to position, bravo. They scrambled down the rocky slope as bullets kicked up dirt around them. Reynolds and the rest of the team were already returning fire, creating a corridor for their retreat. But the enemy fire was intensifying, coming from positions that shouldn't have been there according to their intelligence. They knew we were coming, Reynolds shouted over the cacophony of gunfire. Someone talked. The team fought their way back to a defensive position, a cluster of large boulders that offered some cover. Rodriguez was hit in the shoulder, the bullet passing clean through, but leaving him weakened from blood loss. Washington bandaged him quickly as Chen and Stone established a perimeter. Reynolds took a round to the chest. His plate stopped it, but the impact knocked him back. As he fell, a second shot caught him in the thigh and he went down hard, blood quickly soaking through his tactical pants. Commander's hit. Blackwood moved to Reynolds, assessing the wound. The bullet had nicked the femoral artery. Without immediate medical attention, Reynolds would bleed out in minutes. Blackwood applied a combat tourniquet, but they needed to evacuate and fast. Radio's jammed, Chen reported, frustration evident in his voice. They're blocking all frequencies. Blackwood took command. Stone, what are we looking at? The sniper had crawled to a position where he could observe their attackers without exposing himself. I count at least 30 hostiles, sir. They're well-equipped, military-grade weapons, tactical gear, moving with professional discipline. These aren't your typical domestic terrorists. Extraction plan, Washington asked, his voice steady despite the dire situation. Blackwood considered their options, none of them good. They were outnumbered 5-1. Their commander was seriously wounded, and their communications were jammed, and they were pinned down with limited ammunition. We fight to the ridgeline, he decided. If we can make it to higher ground, we might break through the jamming signal. We'll never make it, Rodriguez said through gritted teeth, his wounded shoulder making him pale beneath his tan. There's too many of them. Blackwood checked his magazine. 12 rounds left. We've faced worse odds. A lie, and they all knew it. But sometimes a lie was necessary to keep men fighting when surrender meant certain death. On my mark, Blackwood said, positioning himself to provide covering fire. Stone, you and Chen take point. Washington, help me with Reynolds. Rodriguez, your rear guard. The men nodded, faces grim but determined. 3, 2, 1, mark. They burst from cover, firing in controlled bursts as they made for the tree line 30 yards away. The enemy responded immediately, a wall of lead tearing through the air around them. Chen took a round to his helmet that spun him around but didn't penetrate. Stone dropped 2 attackers with precision shots. They were halfway to the trees when it happened. One of Koslov's men rose from a concealed position, 20 yards to their right, an RPG balanced on his shoulder, aimed directly at the clustered SEAL team. At that range, there was no missing. There was no time to scatter, no time to respond. In that frozen moment, Blackwood knew they were finished. The crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley, distinctive from the automatic weapons fire that had dominated the battlefield. The RPG operator's head snapped back, a red mist hanging in the air where his face had been a moment before. For a split second, everyone, SEALs and attackers alike, paused in confusion. Then another shot rang out, and another of Koslov's men fell, this one at least 800 yards away at the edge of the compound. Sniper, someone shouted from the enemy position, and suddenly their attackers were the ones diving for cover. 3 more shots in rapid succession, 3 more bodies dropping with the precision that only comes from a world-class marksman. The unseen sniper was creating chaos among their attackers, who now faced a threat they couldn't locate. Move, Blackwood ordered, snapping at his team back to action. They sprinted for the trees as their mysterious guardian continued to eliminate high-value targets. The enemy machine gunner, a man who appeared to be giving orders, the operator of what looked like a jamming device. Once in the relative safety of the dense forest, Blackwood tried the radio again. This time he got a signal. Foxhound Actual, this is Sierra 6, emergency extraction required. We have wounded, including Sierra 1. Request immediate dust-off at coordinates. He rattled off their location. Be advised, we are under heavy fire from hostile forces. The response was immediate. Sierra 6, this is Foxhound. Dust off inbound ETA 15 minutes. Can you make it to the extraction point? Blackwood looked at his team. Reynolds was unconscious now, his face ashen. Rodriguez was barely staying on his feet. Affirmative, Foxhound. We'll be there. As they began to move toward the extraction point, Stone caught Blackwood's arm. Sir, that's sniper. Those shots were taken from extreme range and variable wind conditions. Whoever that is, they're better than anyone I've ever seen. Better than me, for sure. Blackwood nodded. They're still out there, covering our retreat. He keyed his radio again, switching to an open frequency. Unknown sniper, identify yourself. Repeat, unknown sniper, this is Sierra 6. Identify yourself. Only silence answered him. But as they moved through the forest, the distinctive crack of the mystery rifle would sound whenever enemy forces got close, each shot finding its mark with unerring accuracy. The extraction point was a small clearing, barely large enough for a helicopter to touch down. As they approached, Blackwood ordered the team to establish a defensive perimeter. Reynolds was fading fast and Rodriguez wasn't much better. Dust off 2 minutes out. Washington reported listening to the radio. Stone, who had been scanning the surrounding ridgelines through his scope, suddenly went very still. Sir, he said, his voice tight with disbelief. 3 o'clock ridge top, approximately 1,500 yards. Blackwood raised his binoculars. At the very limit of visibility, a figure stood on an exposed ridge. Even at this distance, the silhouette was unmistakably female. As he watched the figure raised what appeared to be a long-range precision rifle in one hand, offering a casual salute with the other before disappearing back into the tree line. Was that? Stone began. Not possible, Blackwood muttered, though a suspicion was already forming in his mind. The distinctive thump, thump, thump of helicopter rotors grew louder, and moments later a Black Hawk appeared over the ridgeline, descending rapidly into the clearing. The team moved quickly, loading their wounded commander and Rodriguez first. As Blackwood prepared to board, he took one last look at the distant ridge where the mysterious sniper had appeared. For just a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flash of something that could have been the sun reflecting off a scope. Then it was gone. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply to avoid presenting an easy target as it cleared the ridge. Below them, the forest canopy gave way to rugged mountain terrain. The mission was a failure, but they were alive, thanks to their unknown guardian. The debriefing at the forward operating base was tense. Colonel Marcus Weber, the operation commander, paced the small conference room like a caged tiger. Let me get this straight, he said, his voice razor sharp. Your team was ambushed. They knew exactly where you would be, exactly when you would be there, which means we have a leak somewhere in the chain. Blackwood, still in his dirt-covered combat fatigues, nodded. That's the only explanation, sir. The intelligence was compromised. And then, Weber continued, you were saved by some mysterious guardian angel with a sniper rifle who just happened to be in the neighborhood. I know how it sounds, Colonel. It sounds like bullshit, Blackwood. Stone, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Sir, with respect, it's not bullshit. I counted 17 confirmed kills from that sniper. Shots taken at distances exceeding 1,500 yards in variable wind conditions on moving targets. Whoever it was, they're the best I've ever seen. Weber's eyes narrowed. Did you get a visual on this miracle shooter? Stone and Blackwood exchanged glances. Partial, sir, Blackwood admitted. A figure on the ridgeline, female based on the silhouette, using what appeared to be a custom long-range rifle. Weber's expression darkened further. Female, the only woman assigned to this operation is... The door to the conference room opened, revealing a junior officer. Sir, we have a situation. Morgan Hayes is missing. The room went silent. Missing? What the hell do you mean missing? Weber demanded. She's not in her quarters, sir. Her personal effects are gone. Vehicle assigned to her is missing from the motor pool. Last confirmed sighting was approximately 2 hours before the team deployed this morning. Weber turned to Blackwood, his face flushed with anger. Your mystery sniper. You think it was Hayes? Blackwood chose his words carefully. Sir, the level of marksmanship we witnessed would require years of training and experience. Hayes is listed as having basic sniper qualification, nothing more. Her file also says she's never seen combat, Weber countered. Yet somehow she vanishes right before my team walks into an ambush, and then a mystery woman saves your asses with shooting skills that would make Carlos Hathcock rise from his grave in admiration. I'm not buying coincidences, Blackwood. You think Hayes compromised the mission, sir? Stone asked, disbelief evident in his voice. That's exactly what I think. And then she had an attack of conscience and decided to save you to cover her tracks. Weber turned to the junior officer. I want Hayes found, now. Issue an alert to all military installations within 500 miles. Notify local law enforcement. I want her brought in for questioning. Yes, sir. As the officer left, Weber fixed his gaze on Blackwood. You vouched for her inclusion in this operation, Colonel. If she's turned, that's on you. Blackwood met his stare unflinchingly. With respect, sir, if Hayes wanted us dead, all she had to do was nothing. Whoever that sniper was, they saved our lives at great personal risk. That doesn't track with someone who betrayed the mission. Weber's expression didn't soften. You're too trusting, Blackwood. Always have been. It's why you're still a colonel at your age instead of wearing stars. He sighed, some of the anger leaving him. Get cleaned up. Full written reports on my desk by 0800 tomorrow. You're both confined to base until this investigation is complete. After Weber left, Stone turned to Blackwood. You don't believe Hayes betrayed us, do you? Blackwood shook his head slowly. No, but I do believe she wasn't exactly who her file said she was. He stood wincing at the stiffness in his joints after the day's exertions. Get some rest, Stone. Something tells me this is far from over. 2 days later, Reynolds and Rodriguez had been stabilized and evacuated to Walter Reed Medical Center. The remaining team members were still confined to base the investigation into the mission failure and Hayes' disappearance ongoing. Blackwood couldn't shake the image of the figure on the ridge or the precision of those impossible shots. In his quarters, he spread out what little information he had on Morgan Hayes. Her official file was comprehensive, but somehow felt incomplete. Olympic-level biathlete, multilingual, expert in wilderness survival, basic sniper qualification, 5 years with military intelligence. Prior to that, a graduate degree in international relations from Georgetown. All impressive, but nothing that explained the level of marksmanship they had witnessed. There was a knock at his door. Stone entered, glancing over his shoulder to ensure he wasn't observed. Sir, I've found something you should see. He placed a small object on the desk between them. It was a spent rifle cartridge, the brass polished to a soft gleam. But what caught Blackwood's attention was the distinctive mark etched into the base. A tiny oast figure, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Where did you get this? Blackwood asked, picking up the cartridge to examine it more closely. It was in my pack. I didn't put it there. Someone else did. And look at the caliber, .338 Lapua Magnum, the same used by whoever saved us out there. Blackwood felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Jack Ghost Hayes used to mark his cartridges like this in Vietnam. Said it was so the enemy would know who sent them to hell. Stone's eyes widened. Hayes, as in Morgan Hayes, his granddaughter. Blackwood set the cartridge down carefully. But according to her file, Morgan Hayes is just a military intelligence officer with basic marksmanship training. Nothing special. That file is bullshit, Stone said flatly. No basic marksman makes the shots we saw. That was world-class skill developed over years. Blackwood nodded slowly, pieces starting to fall into place. Which means her entire background might be fabricated. The question is why? And where is she now? Blackwood stared at the tiny ghost etched into the brass cartridge. I don't know, but I intend to find out. He met Stone's gaze. This stays between us for now. Weber's convinced Hayes betrayed the mission. If he finds out she contacted us even indirectly, he'll have us both in custody faster than you can blink. Stone nodded his agreement. What's our next move? Blackwood pocketed the cartridge. We find out who Morgan Hayes really is and why she saved our lives. Outside, the sun was setting over the Sierra Nevada mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, where 6 men had nearly died. Somewhere in those mountains, a ghost was watching, waiting, and Blackwood couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again sooner rather than later. The ghost of Sierra Ridge had made her presence known. The real question was why. 6 months passed. The investigation into the failed Sierra operation had reached its inevitable conclusion. The official report cited compromised intelligence from an unknown source and recommended improved security protocols for future operations. Morgan Hayes was listed as AWOL, presumed to have deserted her post. A warrant was issued for her arrest, though few resources were allocated to finding her. In the vast bureaucracy of military intelligence, she became just another redacted footnote. For Blackwood, retirement had come swiftly and without ceremony. The Sierra incident had been the excuse his superiors needed to finally put the aging warrior out to pasture. No formal accusations were made, his record remained unblemished, but the message was clear: your time is over. He'd bought a small cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, remote enough for privacy, close enough to civilization when he needed it. Most days he spent his time chopping wood, fishing in the nearby stream, and pretending the nightmares that woke him at 3 a.m. were becoming less frequent. They weren't. Each night the same dream: the RPG operator taking aim, the crack of the rifle from nowhere, the figure on the ridge with his casual salute, and the question that wouldn't let him rest: who was Morgan Hayes really? The brass cartridge with its tiny ghost insignia sat on his bedside table. Some nights he would hold it, turning it over in his calloused fingers, as if it might finally reveal its secrets. Reynolds had survived his injuries, though he'd been medically discharged, the damaged leg never regaining its full strength. Rodriguez had recovered as well, returning to active duty with a new unit. Chen, Washington, and Stone had been reassigned to different teams, the Sierra unit effectively disbanded. Only Stone maintained regular contact with Blackwood, calling every few weeks with carefully worded updates that revealed little over potentially monitored lines. On a crisp October morning, as frost silvered the grass around his cabin, Blackwood's satellite phone rang. Few people had the number. "Blackwood," he answered, his voice still thick with sleep. "The birds are flying south earlier than expected this year." Stone's voice using their prearranged code for an urgent, secure conversation needed. "Is that so? Might be a hard winter coming. The weatherman predicts snow by the weekend. You should stock up on supplies." Translation: something's happening. Be ready to move. I'll be there in 2 days. Appreciate the warning. I'll be prepared. The line went dead. Blackwood placed the phone on the table and rose his joints, protesting as they did every morning. 65 wasn't old by civilian standards, but for a man who'd pushed his body to the limits for 4 decades, it felt ancient some days. He began his preparations methodically. The go bag he kept ready at all times was checked and updated. Weapons were cleaned and loaded. Surveillance equipment was tested. Whatever Stone had discovered, Blackwood would be ready. 2 days later, precisely at dusk, a nondescript SUV with mud-splattered license plates pulled up to his cabin. Stone emerged looking thinner than when Blackwood had last seen him, dark circles under his eyes suggesting many sleepless nights. "You look like hell," Blackwood greeted him, ushering him inside. "Feel worse," Stone replied with a grim smile. "But I found something big." Inside, with the curtains drawn and a signal jammer activated to prevent any electronic eavesdropping, Stone spread a collection of files on Blackwood's kitchen table. "I've been doing some digging on Hayes," he began. "Not through official channels, those are all dead ends. But I have a friend in the CIA Archives Division who owed me a favor." Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "Risky. Necessary." Stone opened the first file. "Morgan Hayes isn't just the granddaughter of Jack Ghost Hayes. She's his protege. After her Olympic career ended a silver medal in biathlon, by the way, she didn't go straight into military intelligence like her file claimed. She spent 3 years off-grid living with her grandfather in Montana. Jack Hayes was 70 then, but still sharp as a tack. He trained her." Stone nodded. "Not just in marksmanship, tactical movement, field craft, survival, everything he'd learned in Vietnam and after. By all accounts, she was a natural, even better than he was. When she finally did join up, she was immediately flagged for special programs." "Which ones?" "That's where it gets interesting." Stone pulled out another file, this one marked with classified Umbra headers. "Ever heard of Project Artemis?" Blackwood frowned. "Vaguely. Some experimental program back in the early 2000s. Female operatives for deep cover infiltration in regions where male operators would stand out. I thought it was disbanded." "Officially, yes. Unofficially, it evolved into something called SHADE." Stone tapped the file. "Specialized High-Altitude Discrete Engagement. A program specifically designed to train female snipers for ultra-long-distance operations in terrain too difficult for conventional teams. The thinking was that women with their generally lower body weight and different center of gravity could reach positions male operators couldn't. Plus, enemy forces rarely expect female snipers, giving them an additional element of surprise. Hayes was Shade, one of their best according to this, deployed on at least 14 classified operations before Sierra, operations that officially never happened. Her cover as a mid-level intelligence officer was just that, a cover. Blackwood absorbed this information, pieces clicking into place. So why was she assigned as liaison to our operation? Why not deploy her in her actual capacity? Stone's expression darkened. That's the million-dollar question, and it's connected to why I'm here. He pulled out another file, this one containing surveillance photos. 3 weeks ago, I was approached by a woman named Sarah Winters, former CIA, now running a private security firm with government contracts. She said she had information about Sierra, but would only speak to me in person. The photos showed an elegant woman in her late 50s, silver-streaked dark hair, pulled back in a severe bun, dressed in the unmistakable tailored suit of a Washington insider. I met her at a cafe in Georgetown. She told me Hayes wasn't just on our operation by chance. She specifically requested the assignment after discovering evidence that the mission was compromised from the start. Stone leaned forward. Winters said there's a shadow organization operating within our intelligence community, called themselves Cerberus, former military intelligence, some political figures, operating outside the law, pursuing their own agenda. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. Sounds like conspiracy theory nonsense. That's what I thought too. Until this. Stone produced a final photo, a satellite image of what appeared to be a compound hidden in dense forest. This facility doesn't officially exist. It's not on any government registry, receives no official funding. Yet it's staffed by former Special Forces operators and has security measures that would make Fort Knox jealous. Where is this? Northern California, about 100 miles from where our Sierra operation went south. Stone met Blackwood's gaze. Winters believes this is a Cerberus training facility and that Kozlov wasn't just some random terrorist. He was working with them. The implication hung in the air between them. If true, it meant their mission had been sabotaged from within, not by Hayes, but by someone much higher in the chain of command. Winters wants to meet you, Stone continued. Says you're one of the few people with the credibility and connections to help expose this. Blackwood stared at the photos, decades of instinct warning him this was a trap, but equally powerful instincts telling him there was truth here too. What about Hayes? Where does she fit in all this? Winters thinks Hayes discovered the Cerberus connection while preparing for our operation. That's why she went off-grid to track them independently. The official story that she deserted or betrayed the mission is a cover-up. Blackwood picked up the brass cartridge from his pocket, running his thumb over the tiny ghost etching. She saved our lives, Stone. Why leave this for us, then disappear again? Why not make contact? Maybe she couldn't risk it, or maybe she's playing a longer game. Stone collected the files, returning them to his secure case. All I know is something stinks about the whole Sierra operation, and Hayes is at the center of it. Winters claims to have more information, but she'll only share it with you in person. When and where? Tomorrow. A safe house in West Virginia. I'll drive. Stone hesitated. This could be dangerous, sir. If Cerberus is real and as connected as Winters suggests, we'd be painting targets on our backs. Blackwood stood, feeling the familiar weight of decisions settling on his shoulders. For months, he'd been existing rather than living, haunted by unanswered questions. Now, finally, there was a path forward. I've been a target before, he said simply. Pack your gear. We leave at dawn. The safe house was a modest hunting cabin nestled in the Appalachian foothills, accessible only by a winding dirt road that would reveal any approaching vehicles long before they arrived. Blackwood approved of the location, defensible, with multiple escape routes and excellent visibility of the surrounding terrain. Sarah Winters arrived alone, driving a mud-splattered Jeep with West Virginia plates. Up close, she was more imposing than her photos suggested, tall, with the ramrod straight posture of someone who'd spent decades in positions of authority. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct and evaluating. Colonel Blackwood, she said here, her voice carrying the faint trace of an accent he couldn't quite place. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Ms. Winters. 20 years with the agency specializing in Soviet and later Russian operations. Deputy Director of the Eastern European Desk until your retirement 5 years ago. Blackwood gestured toward the cabin's small living room. Stone says you have information about Morgan Hayes and our Sierra operation. Winters smiled thinly. Straight to business. I appreciate that. She set her briefcase on the rough-hewn wooden table and produced a small electronic device which she activated. Signal jammer. Old habits. Understandable. She sat folding her hands precisely in front of her. What I'm about to share with you is technically treason. Disclosure of classified operations evidence of illegal activities by U.S. officials. I want you to understand the risk I'm taking. Why take it? Because Cerberus represents everything I spent my career fighting against. Because they've corrupted the institutions I served loyally for 2 decades. Her composure cracked slightly. And because they killed my partner when he got too close to exposing them. Blackwood nodded, recognizing genuine grief and anger when he saw it. Tell me about Hayes. Well, Morgan Hayes is one of the finest operatives I've ever encountered. I recruited her personally for Shade after observing her Olympic performance. The biathlon is perfect training for a sniper marksmanship under physical stress, endurance, adaptability to changing conditions. Her background with her grandfather was an unexpected bonus. Jack Hayes. Yes, a legend in his own time, though few outside special operations circles would recognize the name. He taught her things we couldn't, the intangibles that separate good shooters from true artists. And her connection to Cerberus, Winters, opened her briefcase, extracting a thick file. 2 years before your Sierra operation, Hayes was part of a classified mission in Syria. Extraction of a high-value intelligence asset with information on Russian operations. The mission went bad, ambush similar to what your team experienced. Her entire unit was killed except for Hayes and the asset they were extracting. And she survived through skill or luck. Both. She managed to get the asset to the extraction point, but what the asset told her during that journey is what matters. He claimed a group of American operatives was working with Russian intelligence, sharing information, compromising operations. At first, his claims were dismissed as paranoia or disinformation, until Hayes began investigating independently. Stone, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. She found evidence. Yes, communication logs, financial transfers, meeting recordings. She compiled a damning case and presented it to her superior, General William Stanton. The name hit Blackwood like a physical blow. Stanton. He's one of the most decorated officers in the Army, former Delta advisor to 3 presidents. And the head of Cerberus, Winters said flatly. Hayes didn't know that when she brought him her evidence. She nearly didn't make it out of his office alive. She slid a photo across the table. It showed Hayes, but not the polished intelligence officer Blackwood had briefly met before the Sierra operation. This Hayes was gaunt. Her eyes haunted a jagged scar running from her temple to her jaw. This was taken 3 months after her meeting with Stanton. She'd gone to ground using skills her grandfather taught her to disappear completely. I was one of the few people she trusted enough to contact. Why you? Blackwood asked. I'd been her handler in Shade. And because my partner David Keller had been investigating similar concerns about compromised operations, when Hayes reached out, I put them in touch. Winter's voice tightened. 2 weeks later, David was killed in what was officially ruled a mugging gone wrong. 3 bullets to the chest at close range, yet nothing stolen. A professional hit. Stone exchanged glances with Blackwood. And Hayes disappeared again. For nearly a year, I heard nothing. Then suddenly she contacted me with a request she wanted to be assigned as intelligence liaison to an upcoming operation in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Our operation, Blackwood said. Yes, she discovered that Kozlov wasn't just any terrorist. He was Cerberus's connection to a network of domestic extremist groups they were cultivating for some larger purpose. Your mission was never meant to succeed, Colonel. It was a setup from the start designed to eliminate Kozlov once he'd served his purpose, while making it look like a legitimate counterterrorism operation. The pieces were falling into place now. Hayes realized the mission was compromised, but couldn't warn us directly without exposing herself. Exactly, so she created a backup plan. She positioned herself in advance, established a sniper's hide on the ridgeline with the best vantage point of the likely ambush location. When everything went bad, she intervened. Saving our lives, Stone murmured. And then she vanished again, Winters continued. Went deeper underground than before. Cerberus would have realized she was responsible for saving your team, which meant she'd become an even bigger target. Blackwood considered this new information, testing it against what he already knew. If what you're saying is true, Hayes has been fighting a one-woman war against a shadow organization embedded in our own government. Why come to us now? What's changed? Winter's expression grew grimmer. Two things. First, Hayes has finally compiled enough evidence to expose Cerberus completely right up to Stanton himself. Communications, financial records, video of meetings, names of every member. A bulletproof case that not even their connections could bury. And second, Cerberus knows she has it. They've deployed every resource to find her before she can release the information. Professional hit team surveillance on anyone she's ever been connected with, including you and the rest of your Sierra team. Stone straightened. We're being watched. Almost certainly. Your call to Blackwood likely triggered increased surveillance, though the precautions you took should have prevented them from tracking you here directly. A cold certainty settled in Blackwood's gut. There's more, isn't there? Something you haven't told us yet. Winters nodded slowly. Hayes contacted me 3 days ago. She's been wounded. She needs extraction and protection until she can get her evidence to the right people. Where is she? A safe location in the Sierra Nevada mountains, not far from where your operation went south. She specifically asked for you, Colonel. Said you'd understand why when you saw what she's discovered. The brass cartridge seemed to grow heavier in Blackwood's pocket. When do we leave? Tonight. I have a private plane waiting at a small airfield near Romney. We can be in California by morning. Winters began gathering her files. I should warn you both. If we do this, Cerberus will come after us with everything they have. These aren't ordinary adversaries. They have access to military and intelligence resources, political protection, and absolutely no ethical constraints. Blackwood exchanged a look with Stone, seeing his own determination reflected there. Ms. Winters, we've spent our careers facing extraordinary adversaries. One more won't make a difference. Her smile was grim but appreciative. I hoped you'd say that. There's one more thing you should know. She hesitated. Commander Reynolds, his medical discharge after the Sierra incident. What about it? It wasn't just the leg injury that forced him out. 3 weeks after he was admitted to Walter Reed, he had an unexpected visitor. The next morning he signed his discharge papers and has refused to speak about the operation since. Stone's eyes narrowed. You think he was threatened or turned? I don't know, but I'd consider him compromised until proven otherwise. The implications were clear. If Reynolds had been coerced or recruited by Cerberus, then anything he knew about Blackwood and Stone's recent activities could be in enemy hands. We need to move, Blackwood decided. Now, if Reynolds is compromised, they could already be tracking us here. As if summoned by his words, the distinct sound of rotors thudded in the distance. Stone moved to the window, peering carefully through the blinds. Helicopter, unmarked, coming in low from the east. Winters was already on her feet. We have a fallback position, abandoned mining structure about 3 miles north. If we get separated, rendezvous there. Blackwood grabbed his go-bag and weapon. Years of combat experience kicked in, pushing aside the aches of age and months of civilian soft living. Stone, take the east trail. I'll go west, draw them off if they've spotted us. Winters, go straight north through the creek bed. Less chance of thermal imaging picking you up through the water. They moved with practiced efficiency, exiting through different doors just as the helicopter crested the tree line. Blackwood caught a glimpse of it, a civilian model, but the matte black paint and lack of markings screamed military or intelligence use. The forest closed around him as he moved his footsteps, nearly silent despite his years. Age might have slowed his sprint, but it hadn't dulled the skills honed over decades of operations. He kept to cover, using terrain to mask his movement, occasionally doubling back to check for pursuers. The helicopter circled the cabin, then hovered. Through gaps in the canopy, Blackwood saw fast-roping figures descending, at least 6 operatives in tactical gear. A professional hit team moving with the coordinated precision that only comes from extensive training and experience. He kept moving, putting distance between himself and the cabin while staying within observation range. If they were tracking Stone or Winters, he needed to know. The sharp crack of a rifle shot froze him in place. Then another, not from the direction of the cabin, but from the ridge to the north. Whoever was firing was using a suppressor, but Blackwood recognized the distinctive sound of a high-powered sniper rifle. Through his compact binoculars, he watched 2 of the tactical team crumple to the ground near the cabin. The others scattered for cover, their disciplined movement suddenly chaotic as they searched for the unseen threat. The helicopter banked sharply, attempting to gain altitude and distance. A third shot rang out, and the aircraft lurched as its tail rotor took a hit. Not enough to down it, but enough to send it veering away erratically. Blackwood changed direction, moving swiftly toward the source of the shots. Only one person he knew could make those shots at that range. The climb was punishing his lungs, burning as he ascended the steep, rocky slope toward the ridgeline. Age demanded its toll, but determination pushed him forward. At the crest, he found an indentation in the rock face, a natural sniper's hide with perfect visibility of the cabin and surrounding area. It was empty, but unmistakably had been used recently. Flattened grass, the faint imprint of a rifle bipod, and 3 spent cartridge casings carefully collected, except for one that had rolled into a crevice. Blackwood retrieved it, unsurprised to find the tiny ghost etched into its base. Hayes had been here, had probably saved their lives again. But where was she now? A sound behind him, as soft as scuff of a boot on stone. Blackwood turned, his sidearm half drawn, to find himself facing the barrel of a custom rifle held by a shadow-shrouded figure. "You're getting slow in your old age, Colonel." The voice was female, with an undercurrent of pain beneath its attempted humor. "Hayes." Blackwood slowly lowered his weapon. Or should I say ghost? Morgan Hayes stepped forward, lowering her rifle as well. She looked nothing like the polished intelligence officer he'd met briefly before the Sierra operation. This woman was leaner, harder, her once regulation haircut now grown out and tied back, her face weathered by sun and wind and marked by a vicious scar. She moved with the liquid grace of a natural predator, despite the obvious stiffness in her left side where dark blood stained her tactical jacket. "You're hit," Blackwood noted. "It's nothing. Through and through, missed anything vital." She nodded toward the cabin below where the remaining tactical team members were retreating, dragging their wounded. "We need to move." That was just the advance team. More will be coming. Stone and Winters. Already moving north to the rendezvous point. I spotted them crossing the creek bed. She gestured to a different trail leading down the opposite side of the ridge. "This way. I have transportation waiting." Blackwood followed, studying her as they moved. Despite her injury and evident fatigue, Hayes moved with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the terrain. Each step was placed with deliberate care, her body instinctively finding the path of least resistance. "Winters told us what happened," he said as they descended. "About Stanton, Cerberus. Why you had to disappear." Hayes didn't look back. "Only part of it. She doesn't know everything. Such as the real reason Cerberus exists, what they're planning." She paused at the base of the ridge, scanning the forest before continuing. "It's not just about power or money, though. There's plenty of both involved. Stanton and his people genuinely believe they're saving the country. From what? From itself. They see democracy as messy, inefficient, vulnerable. They want to streamline it, replace elected officials with qualified leaders, meaning people who share their vision." Her voice was clinical, but Blackwood detected the underlying disgust. A military coup wrapped in patriotic rhetoric. The magnitude of what she was describing sank in. That would take more than a few corrupt officials. They'd need significant military support, which they've been cultivating for years, identifying sympathetic officers, promoting them, positioning them in key commands, building networks of domestic extremist groups as potential shock troops, establishing blackmail material on anyone who might oppose them. Hayes led him to a concealed ATV camouflaged with local vegetation. "They were planning to move within the next 6 months, but my activities have accelerated their timeline." "How soon, Sawan?" "Based on the communications I've intercepted, 2 weeks, maybe less." The implications were staggering. A coup in the United States led by decorated military leaders like Stanton could tear the country apart. "The evidence you've gathered, it's conclusive." Hayes nodded, starting the ATV's engine. "Recordings of planning meetings, financial transfers to extremist groups, deployment orders drafted but not yet issued, names, dates, locations. Everything needed to stop them if I can get it to the right people." "Who?" "I have a contact at the FBI, one of the few I'm certain isn't compromised. But getting to him won't be easy." She gestured for him to climb on behind her. "The rendezvous point is 20 minutes from here. We can discuss the rest when we regroup with Stone and Winters." As they rode through the forest, Blackwood processed what he'd learned. If Hayes was right and his instincts told him they were facing an adversary more dangerous than any foreign enemy he'd encountered in his long career. An enemy with intimate knowledge of American military and intelligence capabilities, operating with the resources of those same institutions. The mining structure came into view, a long-abandoned horizontal shaft cutting into the hillside, its entrance partially collapsed, but still passable. Hayes killed the ATV's engine 100 yards away, approaching on foot with the caution of someone who expected a trap. Stone appeared from the shadows of the entrance, his rifle lowered but ready. Clear inside. Winters is treating a minor wound, caught some shrapnel when the helicopter strafed the creek bed. Hayes nodded, visibly relaxing slightly. Anyone follow you? Negative. Used all the counter-tracking measures. Even doubled back twice to be sure. Inside the mine, emergency lanterns cast eerie shadows across the rock walls. Sarah Winters sat on an overturned crate, a bandage wrapped around her forearm. She looked up as they entered, relief visible on her face. Hayes, I was beginning to worry. Takes more than Cerberus hit teams to stop me. Hayes moved to a concealed alcove, retrieving a weatherproof case, though they're getting closer each time. Blackwood studied the setup. The mine had been prepared in advance, supplies stacked neatly, communications equipment established, multiple weapons positioned strategically. You've been using this as a safe house. One of several. I rotate between them, never staying in one place more than a few days. Hayes opened the case, revealing a laptop and several external drives. This is everything I've collected on Cerberus over the past 2 years, enough to bring down Stanton and his entire network. Stone examined the nearest stack of supplies. These are fresh, recently delivered. I have help, Hayes acknowledged, a small network of people I trust. Former operatives, mostly retired, who understand what's at stake. Like your grandfather? Blackwood asked. A shadow crossed Hayes's face. Jack died 6 months ago. Heart attack at his cabin in Montana. At least that's the official report. You don't believe it. He was 82, but still chopped his own wood and hiked 5 miles daily. The timing was too convenient, 3 days after he had helped me escape a Cerberus team in Idaho. Winters moved closer. Hayes, we need to get you and that evidence to Washington immediately. My contact at Justice can arrange protective custody. No. Hayes's response was immediate and firm. The evidence doesn't leave my custody until it's directly in my FBI contact's hands. Too many departments are compromised. Then what's your plan? Blackwood asked. Hayes activated the laptop, bringing up a map. Stanton is hosting a gathering of key Cerberus members at his private estate near Sacramento 3 days from now. It's the final coordination meeting before they launch their operation. Stone studied the map. Heavily secured location, multiple layers of defense. And our best chance to get irrefutable proof tying all the key players together, Hayes countered. I've been monitoring their communications. The meeting will include military commanders, intelligence officials, even 3 senators who are part of the network. Blackwood saw where she was heading. You want to record the meeting. Get them all on tape discussing the coup. Exactly. Combined with what I already have, it would be undeniable evidence. Too substantial to be buried or dismissed as a conspiracy theory. That compound has state-of-the-art security, Winters pointed out. Getting close enough to record anything would be nearly impossible. Hayes's smile was cold. Not for someone who's been studying the security systems for months. Not for someone with access codes and patrol schedules provided by a source inside Stanton's security team. You turn one of his people, Stone asked, impressed. Let's just say Cerberus's methods create enemies even among those who serve them. Hayes winced, finally acknowledging her wound as she sat heavily on a crate. The plan is solid, but I can't do it alone, not anymore. Blackwood exchanged glances with Stone. That's why you wanted us. You need a team. I need people I can trust, absolutely. People with the skills for this kind of operation. People Stanton won't expect. Hayes looked directly at Blackwood. You've been in retirement, officially out of the game. Stone's been reassigned to training duties at Pendleton. Winters is a private security consultant now. None of you would be on Cerberus's immediate threat radar. Until today, Stone noted, that helicopter team saw us. They saw unidentified figures fleeing a cabin. Even if they suspect it was you, they can't be certain. Hayes pulled back her jacket, revealing the bullet wound in her side. It wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it was serious enough to limit her effectiveness. The operation is in 3 days. My source has provided access codes and security details. We go and plant recording devices in the meeting room, get out, and then use the evidence to take down the entire network. Winters looked skeptical. And if something goes wrong, then we use my backup plan. Hayes nodded toward the case containing her evidence. A dead man's switch. If I don't reset it every 24 hours, everything gets automatically uploaded to multiple secure servers and forwarded to journalists at 5 major newspapers. Messy, less certain to succeed, but better than nothing. Blackwood considered the plan. It was audacious, high-risk, the kind of operation he might have designed in his prime. The fact that Hayes had orchestrated it while wounded, hunted, and operating without institutional support spoke volumes about her capabilities. I have one question, he said finally. That day in the Sierra, when you saved us, you were already tracking Cerberus, already in danger. Why risk exposure to save our team? Hayes met his gaze directly. Because that's the oath I took, the same one you took, to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Your team was being sacrificed because of corruption within our own government. I couldn't let that happen. The simplicity of her answer resonated with something fundamental in Blackwood's character. Despite all the years, all the changes in warfare and politics, some principles remained constant. I'm in, he said. Stone nodded. Me too. Winters sighed. This is suicide, you realize. Even if we succeed, Cerberus has enough reach to make us disappear before the evidence ever sees daylight. And not if we have the right protection, Blackwood countered. I still have contacts, people who owe me favors, people even Stanton can't easily touch. Hayes watched him carefully. You have someone in mind. James Richardson, former admiral, now deputy director of national intelligence. We served together in the Gulf. His integrity is beyond question. Can you reach him securely? Yes, there's a protocol we established years ago for emergency communication, completely outside official channels. Hayes nodded. Decision made. Make the contact. If Richardson can provide protection, once we have the evidence, we move on Stanton's compound. As the others began discussing tactical details, Blackwood stepped outside the mine entrance, needing a moment alone. The forest was quiet, the helicopter long gone. Above, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. He thought about the path that had led him here. 40 years of service, countless operations, a lifetime of following orders and trusting the chain of command. Now he was preparing to move against that very system, against men who had once been his colleagues and superiors. Yet there was no hesitation in his mind. If Hayes was right, and everything he'd seen and heard convinced him she was, then this wasn't a betrayal of his oath. It was the ultimate fulfillment of it. The cold brass of the ghost-marked cartridge was smooth between his fingers as he rolled it like a worry stone. Tomorrow they would begin planning the most important operation of his life. An operation not against some foreign adversary, but against enemies within the very institutions he had served loyally for decades. Inside the mine, Hayes was already outlining approach vectors to Stanton's compound, her voice steady despite her wound. Watching her through the entrance, Blackwood was reminded of her grandfather, the same intensity, the same unwavering commitment to mission. The ghost of Sierra Ridge had saved his life once before. Now he would help her save something even more important, the country they had both sworn to protect. Dawn painted the California sky in shades of gold and crimson as Blackwood surveyed Stanton's compound through high-powered binoculars. The estate sprawled across 30 acres of prime Sacramento Valley real estate, its Spanish-style architecture belying the military-grade security that protected it. 3 concentric rings of defense, an outer perimeter of sensors and cameras disguised as landscaping features, a middle ring of roving patrols with mobs, and an inner core of armed guards with tactical training. Like a modern fortress, Stone murmured beside him, making minute adjustments to his rifle scope. Electronic countermeasures, thermal imaging, probably facial recognition at key access points. All designed to keep the peasants away from the lords of the realm, Blackwood replied, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment. William Stanton had once been a respected figure in military circles, a decorated combat leader known for his tactical brilliance. To see him transformed into this, a would-be tyrant, plotting against the very nation he'd sworn to protect, filled Blackwood with a cold fury that transcended personal betrayal. Their observation position was a carefully selected ridge 2 miles from the compound, offering clear sight lines without exposing them to electronic detection. Hayes had chosen it as she had every aspect of the operation with meticulous attention to detail. Movement at the east entrance, Stone reported. Two SUVs approaching. Looks like our first guests, you're arriving. Blackwood shifted his binoculars. Two black Suburbans with government plates passed through the security checkpoint, their windows tinted against prying eyes. Right on schedule. Hayes's intelligence is solid. The plan they developed over the past 72 hours was audacious in its simplicity. Winters would approach the compound openly using her legitimate credentials as a private security consultant, supposedly meeting with Stanton's chief of security about upgrades to the estate's protection systems. Once inside, she would plant a series of specialized recording devices in the main conference room where the Cerberus leadership would gather. Meanwhile, Hayes would establish a sniper's position covering the main approaches, providing overwatch and ready to create a distraction if needed. Stone would maintain a secondary sniper position with overlapping fields of fire, while Blackwood coordinated the operation and maintained communication with their emergency extraction team, three former Delta operators Hayes had recruited from her network of trusted allies. Their one advantage was the unexpected. Cerberus would be looking for a frontal assault, not a subtle infiltration by a respected security consultant, and they certainly wouldn't be expecting the 65-year-old former colonel whom they'd forced into retirement. Winters is in position, Hayes's voice came through their encrypted comms. She had established her hide nearly a mile away on the opposite ridge, giving her clear shots at both the main gate and the helipad, where several of the Cerberus principals were expected to arrive. Blackwood checked his watch. Initiating in 3 minutes. Final comms check. Overwatch 1 green. Hayes's voice was steady despite her still healing wound. Overwatch 2 green. Stone shifted slightly, settling into the perfect shooting position. Infiltrator green. Winters sounded calm professional, betraying none of the tension that had to be coursing through her. Extract team green. The gruff voice of their team leader, a former Delta operator who'd introduced himself only as Mackie, confirmed their readiness. Blackwood took a deep breath, feeling the familiar pre-mission focus settling over him like an old, comfortable garment. Age might have slowed his reflexes, but it hadn't dulled the mental discipline forged through decades of high-stakes operations. Operation Ghost is a go. All elements execute according to plan. Through his binoculars, he watched as Winters' sedan approached the main gate. She rolled down her window, presenting her credentials and appointment confirmation to the guard. After a brief inspection, the gate swung open, allowing her vehicle to proceed up the winding driveway to the main house. Infiltrator is past outer security, Blackwood reported. Stand by. The next 10 minutes stretched like hours, the comms silent, except for necessary status updates. More vehicles arrived at the compound, luxury SUVs and high-end sedans carrying the conspirators who sought to overthrow American democracy. Blackwood recognized several of the figures who emerged: General Howard Mitchell, commander of the Army's 1st Special Forces Command; Senator Arthur Wilson, member of the Armed Services Committee; CIA Deputy Director Elizabeth Conrad. Faces that regularly appeared on news programs discussing national security, now gathering secretly to plot treason. Infiltrator has reached the conference room. Winters' voice came through as a hushed whisper. Planting devices now. Security chief stepped out for a call. Copy, Blackwood acknowledged. You have 3 minutes before he's likely to return. The plan was proceeding perfectly. Almost too perfectly. Blackwood's instincts, honed through countless operations, prickled with unease. Something wasn't right. Overwatch 1, anything unusual from your position? Hayes's response was immediate. Negative. All movement matches expected patterns. Wait, she paused. New arrival at the helipad, not on our intelligence brief. Blackwood shifted his binoculars toward the helipad just as a sleek Bell helicopter touched down. The door slid open and a tall figure emerged, moving with a slight but distinctive limp. His blood ran cold. That's Reynolds. Frank Reynolds, their former commander, the man who'd been wounded in the Sierra ambush. The man who, according to Winters, had received a mysterious visitor at Walter Reed before suddenly accepting a medical discharge. He's compromised, Stone hissed, the betrayal evident in his voice. Son of a bitch is with Cerberus. Infiltrator, be advised, Blackwood said urgently. Reynolds is on site. Consider him hostile. Winter's reply was tense. Copy, devices planted, exfiltrating now. But it was already too late. Through his binoculars, Blackwood saw Reynolds pause at the helipad, turning to speak with someone still inside the aircraft. Then he pulled out a phone, made a brief call, and immediately security personnel throughout the compound began moving with sudden purpose. They know, Blackwood realized. Infiltrator, abort. Security is mobilizing. Get out now. Negative, came Winter's tight response. Main entrance is already locked down. Looking for alternate route. Hayes's voice cut through the growing tension. Service entrance, west side, less security closer to the perimeter fence. Moving there now, Winters confirmed. Stone's rifle shifted slightly, tracking a new target. Security teams deploying in tactical formation. They're initiating a full sweep. Blackwood's mind raced through contingencies. The operation was compromised, but they couldn't abandon Winters inside the compound. Extract team moved to secondary pickup point and standby pen. Overwatch 1 and 2 prepare to provide covering fire if needed. Copy, came the chorus of responses. Through his scope, Blackwood watched the security teams methodically sweeping the compound, moving building to building with professional precision. Winters was good ex-CIA with field experience, but evading an entire security force in a facility designed to prevent exactly that kind of movement would be nearly impossible. I need a distraction. Winters' voice was barely audible now. Pinned down in the kitchen area, 3 guards at the service entrance. Before Blackwood could respond, Hayes's rifle cracked once. 2 miles away, the transformer on a utility pole just outside the compound exploded in a shower of sparks. Immediately, sections of the perimeter lighting went dark. Moving now, Winters reported. Stone's rifle joined the symphony, picking off a security camera in a precise shot that could easily be mistaken for damage from the electrical surge. Compound security is scrambling, Blackwood observed. They think it's a power failure. But Reynolds was not so easily fooled. Through his binoculars, Blackwood watched as the former SEAL commander directed security teams toward the service entrance, his gestures betraying his familiarity with tactical response to precisely this kind of situation. Winters Reynolds is directing teams to your location. You have maybe 30 seconds. Nearly there, she responded, her breathing heavy. Just need to clear the fence. Hayes's rifle spoke again, this time targeting the ground near a security team, approaching from the east, kicking up dirt and forcing them to dive for cover. The momentary confusion gave Winters the opening she needed. I'm over the fence, she reported, moving to extraction point 2. Blackwood allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. Below, Reynolds was scanning the surrounding ridgelines with tactical binoculars, his experienced eye searching for the sniper positions he knew must exist. Overwatch 1 and 2 displace immediately, Blackwood ordered. He's looking for you. Stone was already breaking down his rifle, moving with practiced efficiency. What about you, sir? I'll coordinate extraction. Move now. As Stone disappeared into the tree line, Blackwood maintained his observation of the compound. Reynolds' behavior confirmed what they'd suspected. He was fully aligned with Cerberus, using his intimate knowledge of special operations tactics against his former comrades. The betrayal cut deep. Reynolds had been more than a commander. He'd been a respected colleague, someone Blackwood had trusted with his life on multiple occasions. To see him standing alongside traitors like Stanton, actively hunting the very people who had once been his brothers in arms, was a wound deeper than any bullet could inflict. Infiltrator has reached extraction point, Mac reported. We have her. Moving to Rendezvous Alpha. Copy. Overwatch status. Overwatch 2 clear and moving. Stone confirmed. Hayes's response was delayed by several seconds. Overwatch 1 displacing. Be advised, I have multiple pursuers. Security teams moving up the eastern ridge. Blackwood's jaw tightened. They'd spotted her position. How many? At least 6 moving in tactical formation. Reynolds is coordinating them from below. Her voice remained calm, professional, but Blackwood detected the undertone of strain. Her wound would be limiting her mobility, making a standard escape problematic. Can you evade? Affirmative, but it will take time. Proceed with extraction. I'll rendezvous when clear. Blackwood knew what she was suggesting, that they leave her behind while she led the pursuers away from the team. It was the tactically sound decision. It was also completely unacceptable. Negative. Overwatch 1, we extract together. He was already moving, gathering his equipment with swift, economical movements. Extract team adjust to Rendezvous Bravo. Delay departure until all elements are present. Sir, Stone's voice carried a note of caution. If we wait too long, they'll lock down the entire area. Then we don't wait too long. Blackwood checked his sidearm, ensuring a round was chambered. Overwatch 1, I'm moving to your position to assist. Hayes's response was immediate. Negative, sir. Unnecessary risk. Not up for debate, Ghost. Blackwood was already moving through the forest following a path he'd memorized during their planning phase. You've saved my life twice now. I'm returning the favor. The eastern ridge was steeper than the western observation post, the terrain more challenging for a man of his age. But Blackwood moved with the determination of someone for whom failure was not an option, his breathing controlled despite the exertion. He could hear the pursuit now, voices calling to each other as the security teams spread out across the slope, searching for Hayes. They were professional, disciplined, probably ex-military, recruited by Stanton for their skills and malleability. A single shot rang out, followed by a shout of pain. Hayes was fighting back, picking off her pursuers when clear shots presented themselves. But each shot also revealed her approximate position, a calculated risk she couldn't maintain indefinitely. Blackwood moved laterally across the ridge, positioning himself to intersect with the security team's advance. If he could create enough disruption from an unexpected direction, Hayes might find the opening she needed to break contact completely. The first security operative appeared through the trees 20 yards ahead, moving cautiously with his weapon raised. Blackwood waited until the man passed his position, then struck with silent efficiency, one hand clamping over the operative's mouth, while the other delivered a precise blow to the carotid sinus. The man collapsed without a sound, unconscious but alive. Blackwood appropriated the operative's radio and weapon, then continued his advance. The voices were closer now, more urgent, as they coordinated their search pattern. Sierra 3, check in, a voice demanded over the captured radio. Sierra 3, report status. The lack of response would alert them, but it also told Blackwood their approximate positions from the call signs. Sierra 3 had been the point man, which meant Sierra 2 and 1 would be following in a standard search pattern. He adjusted his approach, moving to intercept Sierra 2. The second operative was more alert, sensing something wrong when his teammate failed to respond. Blackwood had to move more directly, closing the distance rapidly and engaging before the man could raise an alarm. The struggle was brief but intense, Blackwood's experience compensating for the younger man's strength. A well-placed strike to the solar plexus followed by a sweeping leg takedown, and the second operative joined his teammate in unconsciousness. All Sierra elements report, the radio demanded. Possible hostile contact. Converge on Sierra 2's last position. They were adapting quickly as trained professionals would. Blackwood had perhaps 2 minutes before the remaining team members converged on his location. He needed to reach Hayes before then. Overwatch 1, I've neutralized 2 of your pursuers. What's your position? Hayes's response was terse. Creek bed 300 meters north of Peak, pinned down by fire from the west. That would be the remaining security elements, likely Sierra 1, and whatever additional forces Reynolds had deployed. They were attempting to flank Hayes, catching her in a crossfire. Blackwood moved swiftly through the underbrush, no longer concerned with stealth. Speed was now more important than silence. As he approached the creek bed, he could hear sporadic gunfire, Hayes returning shots whenever one of her pursuers exposed themselves. From his elevated position, Blackwood could see the tactical situation clearly. 3 operatives had taken cover behind rocks on the western side of the creek, pinning Hayes down behind a fallen log on the eastern bank. Another 2 were moving to flank her from the north. It was a textbook envelopment maneuver, one that would leave her exposed within minutes. Blackwood keyed his radio, switching to their secure channel. Overwatch 1, I'm above your position to the southeast. On my signal, lay down suppressing fire to the west. I'll take the flanking element to the north. Copy, Hayes acknowledged. Ready on your mark. Blackwood positioned himself carefully, then raised the captured rifle. Execute. Hayes immediately opened fire on the western position, forcing the operatives deeper into cover. Simultaneously, Blackwood engaged the flanking element, his first shot striking the lead operative in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second took a round to the thigh, collapsing with a shout of pain. The distraction was enough. Hayes broke from her position, moving with the fluid grace of a natural athlete, despite her injury, crossing the creek at a shallow point and disappearing into the dense forest on the other side. Blackwood provided covering fire for her retreat, then began his own extraction, moving away from the security team's last known positions. The entire engagement had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it had achieved its purpose. Hayes was clear of the immediate threat. Overwatch 1 is mobile, he reported over their secure channel. Moving to Rendezvous Bravo. Copy that, came Mac's response. Extract team standing by. Be advised we're monitoring increased chatter on emergency bands. Local law enforcement has been alerted to a security incident at the Stanton estate. Understood. ETA 15 minutes. Blackwood rendezvoused with Hayes at a predetermined point half a mile from the creek bed. She was breathing hard, her hand pressed against her side where blood had seeped through her tactical jacket, but her eyes were clear and focused. That was unnecessary, sir, she said, though there was no real reproach in her voice. Disagreed, Blackwood replied simply. Can you make it to the extraction point? She nodded, checking her weapon. Did Winters get the devices planted? Affirmative, all 5 recording devices are in place and transmitting. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. Reynolds is with them, Hayes. He's fully compromised. A shadow crossed her face. I saw. That complicates things. How so? Reynolds knows our tactics, our protocols. If he's advising Stanton on security, the recording devices might be discovered. Blackwood had considered this. We need a backup plan. Hayes checked her watch. The meeting is scheduled to start in 20 minutes. If the devices are found before then all of this was for nothing, Blackwood finished. And we've lost our best chance to expose Cerberus. They moved through the forest in silence for several minutes, each processing the implications of this potential failure. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder in the distance, Stanton's security forces expanding their search. There is one other option, Hayes said finally, her voice thoughtful. Blackwood glanced at her. I'm listening. My original mission before I discovered Cerberus was to eliminate Kozlov, a direct action that would have ended his threat permanently. She met Blackwood's gaze steadily. The same approach could work here. The implication was clear, and Blackwood felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. You're suggesting we take out Stanton and the Cerberus leadership directly? One shot. From my position on the ridge, I had a clear line of sight into the conference room. With the right equipment, I could eliminate Stanton before anyone could react. Her voice was clinical, detached, as though discussing a purely hypothetical scenario. With their leader gone, the others would scatter their conspiracy exposed in the chaos that followed. Blackwood studied her, recognizing the cold calculation of someone who had spent too long fighting alone, who had been pushed to the edge of what duty and honor could justify. That's not who we are, Hayes, he said quietly. We're soldiers, not assassins. We defend the Constitution against all enemies, yes, but we do it within the bounds of the law whenever possible. For a moment, her expression hardened, and Blackwood glimpsed the depth of her isolation and pain. Then something shifted, a subtle softening around her eyes. You're right, she acknowledged. It's just, after everything they've done, everyone they've hurt or killed to protect their conspiracy. I know. Blackwood understood her rage, her desire for a swift and final justice. He'd felt it himself when he'd seen Reynolds standing with the traitors. But if we cross that line, we become what we're fighting against. Men who believe the end justifies any means. Hayes nodded acceptance, replacing the momentary darkness in her expression. Then we need another approach, because Reynolds will find those devices. Their comms crackled to life. Ghost Team, this is Extract. We have incoming multiple vehicles approaching from the main road. Looks like local sheriff's department responding to the estate's alert. Blackwood and Hayes exchanged glances. Their window was closing rapidly. Understood, Extract. Maintain position. We're 5 minutes out. Blackwood switched channels. Overwatch 2 status. At the extraction point with Infiltrator, Stone reported. All secure here, but we need to move soon. A plan was forming in Blackwood's mind, risky but potentially effective. Winters, the recording devices you planted, can they be activated remotely? Affirmative, she replied. They're set to begin recording at the scheduled meeting time, but I can trigger them manually through the secure app. And they broadcast to your receiver in real time? Yes, range is limited to about 3 miles, but the signal is encrypted and nearly undetectable. Blackwood made his decision. New plan. Extract team will evacuate with Winters and Stone immediately. Hayes and I will remain in position long enough to ensure the devices capture the beginning of the meeting, then extract separately. Stone's objection was immediate. Sir, with respect, that's unnecessarily risky. If those devices are discovered, if they're discovered, we'll have lost nothing but time, Blackwood countered. But if they work, we need someone in range to receive and secure the transmissions. The evidence is everything stone. Without it, none of this matters. There was a moment of silence as the team processed this change in plans. He's right, Hayes said finally. We can't risk losing the intelligence. Extract team should move now with Winters in the receiver. The Colonel and I will maintain position until we confirm transmission, then withdraw using the secondary route. The secondary route was longer, more challenging, but also less likely to be monitored or patrolled. It would take them through the roughest terrain in the region before eventually reaching a small airstrip where Hayes had arranged for an unmarked plane to be waiting. Understood, Mac acknowledged after a brief hesitation. Extract team moving to evacuate infiltrator in Overwatch 2 will rendezvous at the alternate location in 12 hours. As Hayes and Blackwood adjusted their course to circle back toward an observation position overlooking the estate, the weight of their decision settled between them. They were isolating themselves, potentially cutting off their escape route if things went wrong. But the stakes demanded nothing less. This wasn't part of your plan, Blackwood noted as they moved through the deepening shadows of late afternoon. Hayes' smile was grim. Plans rarely survive contact with the enemy, especially when the enemy knows your playbook. They established their new position on a wooded hill half a mile from the estate, close enough to maintain reception of the recording devices, but far enough to avoid immediate detection. Through his binoculars, Blackwood could see the increased security presence around the perimeter. Additional guards at all entrances, patrols with dogs sweeping the grounds. They're on high alert, he observed, but they haven't called off the meeting. They wouldn't, Hayes replied, settling beside him with her rifle across her lap. Too many key players traveling from too many locations. This gathering has been planned for weeks. They'll increase security, but they'll proceed. As if confirming her assessment, a new wave of vehicles began arriving at the compound. Luxury cars with darkened windows, their occupants hurried inside under heavy guard. Meeting should be starting now, Blackwood noted, checking his watch. Hayes activated her secure tablet linking to the receiver Winters carried. For several tense moments, they waited, uncertain if the devices had been discovered in the security sweep that must have followed their detection. Then abruptly, the tablet screen illuminated with multiple audio waveforms. The devices were transmitting. "We're live," Hayes whispered, a hint of triumph in her voice. Through the tablet speaker, they could hear the murmur of voices as the Cerberus leadership gathered in the conference room. Then distinctly the authoritative voice of William Stanton calling the meeting to order. "Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for coming on such short notice. As you've been informed, we had a security incident earlier today. Rest assured the situation is under control. Our perimeter was probed but not breached, and we've identified the likely culprits." There was a pause. "Commander Reynolds, your assessment." Reynolds' voice was cold professional. "Based on the tactical approach and the precision of the sniper fire, I believe we're dealing with Morgan Hayes and possibly elements of my former Sierra team. Intelligence suggests they've been gathering information on our operation for some time." "How is that possible?" a woman's voice demanded. "Hayes was supposed to have been neutralized months ago." "Evidently those efforts were unsuccessful," Stanton replied, his tone revealing irritation. "However, their failed attempt today works to our advantage. It confirms they lack concrete evidence of our plans. Otherwise, they would have gone directly to the authorities rather than attempting this amateurish infiltration." Blackwood and Hayes exchanged glances. Stanton's arrogance was palpable and potentially useful. He believed they had failed, that their amateurish infiltration had yielded nothing of value. He had no idea that his every word was now being recorded, transmitted, and preserved as evidence. "Given these developments," Stanton continued, "I believe we should accelerate our timeline. Senator Wilson, are your people in position?" "Yes," came the reply, the voice matching that of the senator Blackwood had observed arriving earlier. "Key committee memberships have been arranged exactly as planned. The necessary regulatory changes can be implemented within 72 hours of receiving the go signal." "Excellent. General Mitchell, military readiness." "The designated units are conducting training exercises near the specified government facilities. Commands have been structured to ensure only our people are in key positions. We can move within 4 hours of the authorization code." The magnitude of what they were hearing struck Blackwood like a physical blow. This wasn't just talk or hypothetical planning. Cerberus was ready to move with military units already positioned near their targets. Political figures prepared to provide cover through official channels and intelligence assets ready to control the narrative. They were listening to the final planning stages of an actual coup attempt against the United States government. Hayes's expression had gone completely still, her eyes focused on the tablet as the conversation continued, each participant reporting their readiness for what they euphemistically called the transition. Director Conrad, what about NSA and FBI leadership? Stanton asked. NSA is handled. The current director will be unavailable when the operation commences, with our deputy ready to assume control. FBI is more problematic. Director Matheson has proven resistant to our overtures and has recently increased internal security measures. I recommend we include him in the initial neutralization phase. Agreed, Stanton replied without hesitation. Reynolds add Matheson to the Alpha list. Priority 2. Copy that, Reynolds acknowledged. Alpha list updated. The cold-blooded calculation with which they discussed the neutralization of American officials sent a chill through Blackwood. These weren't foreign terrorists or enemy combatants. These were men and women who had sworn oaths to protect and defend the Constitution, now plotting its subversion with the same tactical precision they'd once used in service to the nation. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes, each participant providing status updates and receiving final assignments. The picture that emerged was comprehensive and chilling, a coordinated seizure of key government functions, media outlets, and communication infrastructure, all occurring simultaneously under the guise of responding to a fabricated terrorist threat. When the meeting finally adjourned with Stanton instructing all participants to maintain communications blackout until execution day, 3 days hence, Hayes disconnected the tablet from the receiver. We have it all, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Names, positions, specific plans, timeline, everything needed to stop them. Blackwood nodded, still processing the enormity of what they'd uncovered. We need to get this to Richardson immediately. With this evidence, he can mobilize legitimate national security assets to arrest everyone involved. Agreed, but we need to move now. Hayes gestured toward the compound where security vehicles were beginning to deploy outward. They'll be expanding their search perimeter, looking for any remaining surveillance. They withdrew from their observation post, moving deeper into the forest as the sun began to set. The secondary extraction route would take them through nearly 15 miles of wilderness before reaching the remote airstrip where their transportation awaited. Under normal circumstances, it would be a challenging journey. With Hayes's wound and the pursuit that would surely follow once Cerberus realized the meeting had been compromised, it would be a grueling test of endurance and in will. As darkness fell, they continued their trek, navigating by starlight and Hayes's intimate knowledge of the terrain. The forest was alive with night sounds, the rustle of small animals, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through pine needles. Nature oblivious to the human drama unfolding beneath its canopy. You've spent a lot of time out here, Blackwood observed during a brief rest period, noting how confidently Hayes moved through the darkness. After I discovered what Stanton was planning, this became my home, she replied, checking her wound, which had begun bleeding again during their exertion. I mapped every trail, every stream, every ridgeline, established caches and safe houses, learned to move like the hunters who've been tracking these forests for generations. Your grandfather taught you well. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Jack always said wilderness skills were the one thing technology couldn't replace. Machines break, batteries die, but knowing how to read the land never fails you. They resumed their journey, the terrain growing steeper as they approached a mountain pass that would take them beyond Cerberus's likely search radius. The physical toll was evident in their labored breathing, in the careful way Hayes guarded her injured side, in the stiffness of Blackwood's movements as decades-old injuries protested the punishing pace. As they crested a particularly challenging slope, Hayes suddenly raised her hand, signaling a halt. Her head tilted slightly, listening intently. What is it? Blackwood whispered, his own senses immediately heightening. Helicopter, coming from the east. She pointed toward a rocky outcropping. Under cover now. They concealed themselves as the distinctive thump of rotor blades grew louder. A moment later, a black helicopter crested the ridge to their south, powerful spotlights sweeping the forest below. It was flying a search pattern, methodical and thorough. They're using thermal imaging, Hayes noted grimly. The rocks will mask our signature temporarily, but we can't stay here. The helicopter continued its sweep, moving closer to their position with each pass. Soon it would be directly overhead, its sophisticated sensors penetrating the natural camouflage that had protected them thus far. We need to split up, Hayes decided. I'll move north, draw them away from the extraction point. You continue east with the evidence. Blackwood shook his head firmly. Not happening. We move together or not at all. This isn't a debate, Colonel. The evidence is what matters. If they recapture me, it changes nothing. If they get that recording, everything we've done is for nothing. Before Blackwood could respond, the tablet in Hayes's pack emitted a soft but audible alert. Her face tensed as she checked it. What is it? Blackwood asked, noting her expression. Emergency signal from Winters. The extraction team has been intercepted. Local authorities acting on information from Stanton's people. Her voice remained steady, but Blackwood could see the calculation in her eyes as she processed this new complication. They're being detained for questioning. Can they protect the evidence? The receiver is designed to destroy itself if tampered with, and Winters knows enough counter-interrogation techniques to buy time. But this changes everything. She studied the terrain ahead, making rapid adjustments to their plan. We need to reach the alternate communication point. There's a secure satellite uplink hidden at a ranger station 5 miles from here. We can use it to contact Richardson directly. The helicopter was drawing closer, its sweeping searchlight creating moving shadows through the forest canopy. They had perhaps 2 minutes before it would be directly overhead. There's a stream about 300 yards north, Hayes continued. Moving water will mask our thermal signature long enough to clear the search area. They moved out, staying low and using natural features for cover as they made their way toward the stream. The helicopter continued its methodical pattern, but a second set of rotor beats joined the first, another aircraft joining the search. They're committing serious resources, Blackwood observed. Stanton must suspect something went wrong with the meeting. Or Reynolds figured it out. He knows our capabilities, knows what we might have been able to accomplish even after the initial infiltration was detected. Hayes paused at the edge of the tree line, surveying the open ground they would need to cross to reach the stream. When we move fast, no hesitation. Blackwood nodded, ignoring the protest of joints that had endured too many hard landings and impact injuries over a lifetime of service. Lead the way, Ghost. They crossed the open ground in a coordinated rush, reaching the stream just as the helicopter's spotlight swept the area they'd vacated seconds before. The water was frigid, numbing their legs as they waded upstream, using the natural channel to mask their heat signatures and obscure their burr trail. For nearly an hour, they followed the stream's course, the sounds of the search gradually fading behind them. The water sapped their body heat, making each step more challenging than the last. But they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge of what would happen if they failed. When they finally emerged, soaked and shivering in the mountain night, Hayes led them to a hollow pine where she had cached emergency supplies. Dry clothes, energy bars, basic medical supplies, and most importantly, a secure satellite phone. We're outside their likely search pattern now, she said, changing the dressing on her wound with practiced efficiency. But we need to keep moving. The ranger station is 3 miles northwest from here, uphill most of the way. Blackwood changed quickly, grateful for the dry clothing despite its imperfect fit. The satellite phone was a last resort. Using it might give away their position if Cerberus had access to the right signal intelligence capabilities. But with the extraction team compromised, they had few options left. What's our timeline? He asked, checking his watch. It was just past midnight. Based on what we heard in the meeting, Cerberus plans to execute their operation in approximately 60 hours. We need to get the evidence to Richardson with enough time for him to mobilize a response. Hayes repacked her gear with swift, economical movements. Best case scenario, we reach the ranger station by dawn, make contact with Richardson and have a new extraction in place by midday. In worst case, her smile was grim. We don't want to consider the worst case, Colonel. They resumed their journey, the terrain growing increasingly challenging as they ascended toward the ranger station. Despite the cold and fatigue, despite Hayes's wound and Blackwood's age, they maintained a steady pace. The stakes allowed nothing less. As the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky, they approached the ranger station, a small utilitarian structure perched on a rocky prominence, overlooking a vast expanse of wilderness. In summer months, it would be staffed by Forest Service personnel. In late autumn, with the tourist season long over, it stood empty and isolated. Hayes approached cautiously, surveying the building and its surroundings for any sign of disturbance or surveillance. Finding none, she led them to a maintenance shed behind the main structure, where she quickly located a hidden panel in the flooring. Emergency cache, she explained, removing a metal case from the concealed compartment. Established it 8 months ago when I first started monitoring Stanton's compound. Inside the case was a sophisticated communications array satellite uplink encryption module and a power source independent of the ranger station systems. Military-grade, Blackwood noted, impressed by her foresight and preparation. Borrowed from people who owed me favors, Hayes replied, activating the system. Let's hope Richardson is where he's supposed to be. She entered a complex series of codes establishing the secure connection through multiple proxy servers that would make the transmission nearly impossible to trace or intercept. Then she transmitted the carefully memorized sequence that would alert Richardson to the nature and urgency of their communication. For several tense minutes they waited, the only sound in the small shed their own measured breathing and the soft electronic hum of the equipment. Then abruptly the display illuminated with a text response, "Channel secure. Proceed." Hayes connected the tablet containing their evidence, uploading the complete recording of the Cerberus meeting along with her own extensive documentation of the conspiracy. When the transfer was complete, she initiated the voice communication. Oracle, this is Ghost. Package delivered. Authentication code Sierra Echo 729er. The response came immediately, the voice unmistakably that of Admiral James Richardson. Authentication confirmed. Package received and verified. Contents are disturbing, to say the least. It's all there, sir, Blackwood interjected. Names, operations, timeline. They're planning to move in less than 60 hours. I can see that, Colonel. Richardson's voice was grave. Your extraction team has been compromised. Local authorities are holding them on fabricated charges. I'm working to secure their release through back channels. Sir, with respect, the evidence must reach the proper authorities immediately, Hayes urged. Stanton has penetrated multiple agencies, but there are still officials we can trust. Agreed, Bacon. I've already initiated contact with the FBI director and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Both have been briefed on potential internal threats, though not the specifics until now. There was a pause. Your current location is vulnerable. Satellite surveillance identified increased activity in your region approximately 30 minutes ago. Multiple vehicles moving on Forest Service roads within 10 miles of your position. Hayes and Blackwood exchanged glances. Their window was closing fast. Extraction options, Blackwood asked. Limited. Commercial air assets are being monitored. Ground transportation would be intercepted. Richardson's tone shifted, becoming more determined. I'm authorizing an emergency military extraction. Marine Corps Special Operations helicopter diverted from training exercises. ETA your location 90 minutes. Sir, if Cerberus has penetrated military command structures, Hayes began. This crew comes directly from my personal security detail. Ghost. Handpicked, vetted, and absolutely loyal. They'll get you out. Richardson's confidence was unwavering. Transmitting coordinates for the extraction point now. The display showed a small clearing 3 miles from their current position, challenging to reach in their condition but manageable. Understood, sir. We'll be there. One more thing, Richardson added. Based on this evidence, I'm initiating Operation Sentinel, the contingency protocol for internal security threats at the highest level. As of this moment, we're running a shadow command structure, bypassing potentially compromised chains. By the time Stanton realizes what's happening, it will be too late. The implications were significant. Operation Sentinel was a classified protocol established after 9/11, designed to maintain government continuity in case of catastrophic attack or internal subversion. It granted extraordinary temporary authorities to a small group of pre-designated officials operating outside normal channels. Godspeed, Richardson concluded. Oracle out. As the connection terminated, Hayes began breaking down the communication system, ensuring no trace remained of their presence. We have 90 minutes to reach the extraction point, Blackwood noted, checking his watch. Can you make it? Hayes secured the last component, her movements betraying the fatigue and pain she'd been suppressing. I've come this far, Colonel. 3 more miles won't stop me now. Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber. It was the dawn of what promised to be a pivotal day in American history, though few would ever know the full story of what had transpired in these remote hills, or the sacrifices made by a small group of patriots to preserve the nation they had sworn to defend. As they began their final journey toward extraction, Blackwood found himself reflecting on the strange path that had led him here. A career soldier forced into retirement, drawn back into service by a mystery and a sense of duty that transcended official orders or institutional loyalty. And beside him, Morgan Hayes, the ghost of Sierra Ridge, a woman who had sacrificed everything to fight an enemy most Americans would never know existed, who had endured isolation pain and the betrayal of those she had once trusted, never wavering in her commitment to her oath. "When this is over," Blackwood said, as they crested a small rise, the extraction point visible in the valley beyond. "What will you do?" Hayes paused, seeming surprised by the question. For a moment, the hardened operative facade slipped, revealing a glimpse of the woman beneath, younger, more vulnerable than her experiences should have allowed. "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "For 2 years, stopping Cerberus has been my only focus. You could come back, officially I mean. With what you've done, the right people would ensure you received the recognition you deserve." Her smile held a touch of sadness. "Some ghosts are better left in the shadows, Colonel." She gazed toward the horizon where the distant thrum of helicopter rotors was just becoming audible. "But I appreciate the thought." As the Marine Corps helicopter appeared over the ridgeline, executing a perfect approach to the small clearing, Blackwood realized that the ghost of Sierra Ridge might never receive public acknowledgement for her service. Her name would not appear in official reports or on commendation medals. She would remain for most an unknown soldier in a shadow war. But he would remember. And in the end, perhaps that was enough, that somewhere someone knew the truth of what she had done and the lives she had saved. Not just his team in the Sierra Nevada mountains, but potentially the very foundation of American democracy itself. The helicopter touched down, its crew chief gesturing urgently for them to board. As they secured themselves in the aircraft, the pilot gave a thumbs-up confirmation that their extraction was proceeding as planned. "Ghost and Oracle are secure," the crew chief reported over his comms, returning to base. As the helicopter lifted off, banking sharply to clear the surrounding ridgeline, Blackwood caught Hayes's gaze. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the years of isolation, there was a peace in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The peace that comes with mission completion, with knowing that the fight, however difficult, had been worthwhile. "It's over," he said, his words nearly lost in the roar of the rotors. Hayes nodded, allowing herself the luxury of resting her head against the vibrating fuselage. "Not yet," she replied, "but soon." Below them, the vast wilderness of the Sierra Nevada stretched to the horizon, its peaks and valleys bathed in morning light, its secrets, like the ghost who had haunted its ridgelines, preserved in shadow.